At the moment, I can't yet click through to view a user's profile. Let's fix that. Now, I already have the design, so this is what a profile page looks like. Let's get started. But first, a little bit of housekeeping. So in my Tweets controller, you'll notice here, the name of the view, it's fine. I usually like to be a little more consistent. So if I'm in a Tweets controller, usually there's a folder called Tweets. So I'm going to make sure that is what I have here. So in my views directory, we'll add a new directory called Tweets. And this is now going to move within there. And then lastly, I will update this to index. All right, so now back to Firefox. There should be no change, but I'm just making that a bit more consistent. When you can, follow conventions. Okay, next, you'll notice here I'm on the Tweets page, which is this, and it's a 3-column layout. But if I go to the profile page, that too is a 3-column layout. So it's looking like that is our standard layout. However, we've put it all in the Tweets view, which would mean in the profile page, I'd have to repeat this. So let's fix that. I'm going to now move this into my layout file, and that goes right here. And now it sounds like this section right here is actually where the main content goes. Yield content. Okay, so now our layout file has the 3 columns, and our tweet page will simply have this section here. So again, if I come back to Firefox and refresh, we still get the same thing, but now I can reuse that 3-column layout. All right, let's get started. In my routes file, we need a route to view a profile. And in the address bar, you can imagine doing something like example.com, the name. This is really common. You could do users/the name. You could do profiles/the name, anything you want. Let's keep it simple though. We'll say profiles/ and then a specific user. That'll hit profiles controller at show. We will need to create that. PHP Artisan make controller. And then finally within there, let's hide the sidebar. We'll add a show method that accepts a user. Okay, so I want to show you something. If I simply return that directly from the route and we visit profiles/John, oh yeah, this is something to think about. So real quick, if I go to Table Plus, you'll notice that we actually don't have a username. We have name instead, which is the full name. So we might want to make that a username specifically or add an additional column in the future. Because right now, yeah, you'd have to do something like this, which is awkward, right? So for the time being, I'm just going to make that more like a username, and then later we can add a new column. Okay, so now I want to access the profile in this way, and you'll see we get this string. Okay, well, we want that to be a user. So if I type hint it, let's see if the route model binding will do its thing, and it doesn't. We get a 404. And this is because by default, Laravel is assuming that the route key name is the ID of the user. So if I instead said 1, all right, well now it knows, well, you want a user, that wildcard is 1, so let's find the user with an ID of 1 and create the model. So what do we do when we want something a little more user-friendly, like that? Well, there's 2 ways. I'll show you the Laravel 6 and below way, and then how you might do it for Laravel 7 and beyond. We can go to the user model, and at the bottom, you can override a method, and it's called, get route key name. You're going to override this method. This is the name of the key, or the attribute in the database that should be used for route model binding. And again, it's usually the primary key, the ID. But instead, we're going to return the name instead. So now effectively what it's going to do, well, actually, let me show you. So we'll come back and refresh, and now it works. But here's something I do want to show you. In my routes file, let's just spit out, I have a little snippet here. This quickly listens for any database queries, and it dumps them. It's at the bindings as well. All right, so if we were to come back, let's temporarily comment that out. And if I disable this, I just want to show you the before and after. Anyways, let's go back to the browser. If I load the page, here's the query. Select from users where the ID equals John Doe. So notice it's trying to use the ID by default. But by updating this, we're saying actually the key to use is the user's name. Now if I refresh, that gets updated. And this is what we want. Okay, so let's come back to profiles, get the user, and then get rid of this here. And it works. Now, back in our profiles controller, let's return a view profiles.show, and then I'm going to send through the user. All right, we have our next step. So into the resources directory, we have a new directory, profiles, and then one to show. Okay, so you'll notice now we can reuse most of that layout file. Just as a quick proof of concept. Come back, refresh, and there you go. So now, why don't we link here? So if I go back to my tweets page, presumably the avatar and the username should link there. So let's do this. First, we could give it a name. So now we can use the route name profile, and then we pass through the user in question. And next, if we go to a view for tweets, so that will be this page here. When we render a tweet, right up here, yeah, it sounds like this should be wrapped within an anchor tag. Okay, so now this should go to, you could even use a controller action, by the way, which I like, but this will just be a route name profile, and it will need the tweet user. So here's a little tip. If I come back and refresh, you'll see that this does in fact work. So if I click on it, it does take me to Juliet's profile page. However, notice I provided the full user model. You would expect to provide the attribute itself, right? And that will still work. So I can still click through there. However, if you provide a model, Laravel's smart enough to know, okay, let's find what the route key is. Oh, it's name. And then let's pass in only that attribute. Okay, so we have that. And then the heading itself. So this will be this section here. That too should be an anchor tag. So we'll bring that up and we'll repeat this. So now for every single tweet, I can click through to the user's profile. Now, real quick, let's do the same thing for the friends list. So I'm going to reuse this snippet here. We'll go to our friends list and yeah, let's see. So it's really the whole thing, but then yeah, if I wanted to do this, we'll have to change the layout a little bit, won't we? So I'll show you. If I come back, I think it's going to be, oops, no. Anyways, come back, refresh. Yeah, so notice we lost Flexbox because we set Flex on the div parent, but that only has a single child. So we actually want to set Flex on the anchor tag instead. Come back, refresh, and there we go. And in fact, do we even need the div? Let's see if we can survive without it. Yeah, I mean, we may in the future. I don't think it's a horrible idea to keep it just in case we add something else, but we might be able to remove that. All right, so now I can click through to these as well. And then finally, if I click home, well, I'd rather that take me back to my timeline. So let's go to the sidebar links, and I hate the formatting here. Let's fix this. There we go, much better. Anyways, finally, let's link to the home route. So now I'm on Juliet's profile, but if I click home, we're back on our timeline. One last thing while we're here, the profile page should take me to my profile. Route, profile, and this would be the current user. Okay, so now profile takes me to my page and home takes me back. So now here's the cool thing. You'll notice that our main homepage has this timeline here. If I go back to Zeppelin, it's the same thing. So we can reuse this, and we should reuse this. So back to PHP Storm, and our tweets page, let's see. This is the timeline itself. So it sounds like that very much should be a partial, and I thought it already was, but I guess not. Yeah, we don't have one. Okay. I'll paste that in. And now this can be swapped out with timeline. And we'll still get the same thing. Or you could even make it a component for Laravel 7 and above. All right, so now check it out. If I go to my profiles page, we can get a head start. So right here, yes, we have that, just temporarily. We could spit out the timeline here. However, if I refresh, it's not going to work, right? Because it needs to know, well, what are the tweets for the timeline? We could do this in a couple ways. We could go back to profiles controller. We have the user, right? So we could always just say, well, the tweets I want you to render are the current user's tweets. And you'll remember an episode ago, we added that relationship. So that'd be a fun way to go about it. refresh, and now we have a timeline of only John Doe's tweets. But if I go to Montana, there's hers and Juliet's. So now let's just finish up by very quickly scaffolding this. So let's go to profile/show, and then all of this will be swapped out. Actually, maybe the whole thing is the header, isn't it? Yeah. Header. Now, behind the scenes, I've already saved a default profile banner. And by the way, all I did here was I selected this and I saved it as a JPEG. Okay, so if nothing else, I give it a refresh and we have that. Of course, we need some spacing below it. We can see there, maybe a couple rem. Margin bottom, how about 6? Next, let's see. So this is going to be a flex container, and we're going to use justify between. That way we have this one on the far left and this set of buttons on the far right. So we'll add a new one. It'll have a class of flex and justify between. All right, so here would be the user's name. Maybe below it, I don't know what this would be. Maybe each person has a little catchphrase, or it could be when they joined, and that's probably what we'll do. So something like this. Joined, and then we could say user created at diff 4. Yeah, maybe not diff. This is fine to get started. So we'll have that, and then over here we'll have 2 buttons. Now I think we have a button, and what we might want to do, see, I don't like repeating that, so we might extract that to something a little more reusable, even if it's just again, a blade component. But at least for a little bit longer, I'm going to save that and just duplicate it. And I'll paste that in. And what do we need there? So that would be edit profile, and then another one for follow me. Okay, so these two, well, actually, let's take a look. Yeah, so notice this section is to the left, this section is to the right. A couple of things. This should be bold, this should be smaller. So up here, font bold. Let me see here. How big is it? 25. I don't know what that would be. 2XL. And then a little margin bottom. And then below it, I assume this is more like small text. Okay, so we come and give it a refresh. Yeah. And you know what? Maybe no margin bottom. Yeah. Next, we want a little spacing below the image itself, just to push it down. Why don't we align these? So here, item center, align the items to the center. Looking a little better, but next those buttons aren't quite right. So they're not capital, and then one is white, one is a different shade of blue, and it looks like the border radius is full. Okay. So let's see, this now becomes rounded full. This does not have a background of blue. And then we're going to do text extra small for both of these. All right. And of course, this would be black. Finally, I'd like a little more padding. So yeah, notice I'm having to repeat myself. This is why I might extract it to a component. Could be a blade component, could be a view component. Anyways, we get something like that. A little more. So there's no shadow, but this one there is. Let's see. So let's get rid of a shadow there and replace it with a border. Anyways, come back. Yeah, close enough. We're getting pretty close. I don't want to spend too much on the design work, but you get the basic idea. So the only remaining step is to put their avatar in the center. And, I'm thinking that's going to be absolutely positioned. What do you think? It might be easier. So let's see, where do we put it? Maybe right down here. So let's see, let's reuse the avatar. And again, when you find yourself reusing these, turn it into something reusable. But a little bit longer just to make sure we know how we're using these. So let's see, yeah. All right, so right down there, let's see, if I were to absolutely position it, so for example, if I did the top, it's going to go to the top of the page, and that's because, let's hide that. That's because on our header, we haven't set a positioning context. So let's set a positioning context, and now it'll be the top of that container. Next, if I switch back, I know this is 150 pixels, horrible quality, but of course we would replace that. And then if we want to center it, yeah, this sometimes can be tricky because if you say 50%, well, that's not quite right because then the left edge will be 50%. And you actually want it to be 50% minus half the width of this. So sometimes what you can do is say, well, it should be 50% minus half of the width, which would be 75 pixels. Yeah, so now you can see that's centered. Finally, if we're hard coding the width, which we may not do actually, we may have to use percentages. Anyways, these are all things we can just sort of tweak as we play around with it and check how responsive this should be. I'm kind of eyeballing this. Anyways, we'll likely tweak this, especially for responsive purposes. But until then, I'm fine going with this. So let's see. We want it absolute. And then I'm just copying this. Width is 150 pixels. Left is 50% minus 75 pixels. All right, so come back and refresh. Oh, and we forgot to set the position and context. And then finally, we forgot top. What was top? 47%. Come back, refresh, close enough. Finally, this is so muddy, and I'm assuming it's because of the size. So where's avatar? Yeah, I'm assuming if you set 40 pixels, we could make this dynamic. We could make it just a helper method. But could I do 200? Yeah, that ends up being way clearer. And then we can just decrease these, like so. And this is a good pattern to get to anyways. Or actually, was it 50? So friends list, yeah, we're doing a lot of little things here. And I believe this one was set to 40. So if we come back, give it a refresh, there we go. And that looks much better. Finally, to finish up, we need a description. We don't even have a description for a user. So that will be something we have to add. But until then, I'm going to hard code it and it will be small text. So we're going to put that, let's go back to the profile. Place it in there, reformat, and then finally set it to small text. Finally, actually, let's do this. This should go above the image. And then on the div up here, let's give it a little spacing below, or maybe 4. All right, switch back. Yeah, we're getting very close. This is not quite right, is it? So this is what I meant. We may need to tweak this a little bit because we're setting the top equal to a percentage of the height, which is weird. So what I'm going to do instead is do a pixel-based value. 138, good enough for now, and then we'll take a closer look at that in a little bit. All right, so I'm comfortable enough with that. The only remaining thing is notice how the border radius here is different from what I have here and here. I don't think that's in the design, so these are little things you can miss. I see a border radius of 20. Let's check there. 20 again, and well, it's part of the image, but that would be 20 as well. So let's see what we need this to be. So we have rounded large. Maybe it should be rounded extra large. Oh, and I don't have that. I thought we did. Okay, let's go ahead and tweak this. So what I can do is say, and you can get this on the documentation for Tailwind, we're going to init, and I want the full configuration file so I can tweak and review everything. So this will give you a new Tailwind config file in your document root. And now if I look for radius, so here's what we have currently. Now what I could do is manually add an additional one, but maybe we'll just say our large border radius is equal to what we have here, which is 20 pixels. You'll notice we're specifying it in rems though, which is a good practice. So why don't we convert it? At the moment, you can see large is 0.5 rems. Let me show you. Here's a little side lesson. So if we take a look at the computed radius, 0.5 translates to 8 pixels. And you can do this by saying the HTML root font size, which is 16 pixels, times 0.5, and that gives you 8. That's how you perform that calculation. Or to reverse it, if we have 8 pixels, we divide it by the HTML font size, and we get 0.5. So in our case, we want it to be 20, and that'll give us 1.25. All right, so now I'm going to recompile that because we've changed a few things. But one benefit is now when I give it a refresh, everywhere I have a large border radius should be updated. So let's rerun it, and there you go. So now notice if I select any of these and we check the radius, it'll be set to 20 pixels. All right, we're doing great work. You have your timeline here, but oh no, we screwed up. Let's fix this real quick, and then I promise you are officially done. Set a width of 50 and a height of 50. Anyways, all better. So you can publish tweets, you have your timeline, all of your friends, and you can view the profiles of your friends. Not too shabby.